Great.
We're doing great. All right. Awesome. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Paige Mitchell. I'm a board certified life coach, motivational speaker, and mental health advocate. I help badass goal getters reach their most ambitious dreams so they can live a fulfilling life and make a difference in their own unique way. I'm really excited about this conversation about boundaries today. I recently met with my friend and past colleague, and we talked a lot about boundaries. And so I just thought it'd be really valuable to share this information and little golden nuggets with you. And so I will be interviewing Jenny Wanty. Wanty. Like I want you, girl.
I want you.
I want you. I've worked side by side with Jenny when I was a behavioral health counselor, when I was working at an eating disorder treatment center. And she is such an amazing clinician and overall human being. And I just can't wait to introduce her and talk more about boundaries with you today. So Jenny has her master's in counseling. She's a licensed therapist based in Colorado, and she works at Somatic Therapy Partners, which is an amazing group. It's a psychotherapy practice located in Denver, using body-based therapy to help you heal. And so I will put them in the description as well if you wanted to follow them or go to their website. Overall, it's an amazing therapy service and I highly recommend. So without further ado, welcome, Jenny. Thank you so much. I'm excited to be interviewing and talking to you about boundaries today.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Paige, for having me. And I'm really excited to talk about boundaries because I love them so much. So glad to be here.
Yay. So tell me a little bit about yourself, where you live and the type of therapy that you do.
Yeah, so I live in Denver, Colorado. And so like you said, I'm a licensed counselor here in the state of Colorado. And the specific niche that I do currently is somatic therapy. And now that is an umbrella term these days. There's a lot of different things that can fall under somatic therapy. But the way I like to think about it is I'm helping folks specifically with developmental trauma. So trauma that happens from you're in the womb until about 10-ish years old. Really just find healing, not just through talking in therapy, but helping the body heal from those wounds. Because what we know about trauma is it happens at the body level. So we can't leave it out of the therapeutic space. We actually have to make sure it's front and center.
That's so beautiful. And not, maybe it's mainstream now in 2022, but I've never heard of that in my life.
Yeah, it's definitely, I think it's becoming more and more at the forefront, but it's definitely more cutting edge, I would say, in the psychotherapy world or the therapy world. But the more research that is done, the more people are realizing how much the body is impacted in very physical ways through trauma and through stress. So I think that's part of why it's becoming more and more front and center, which I think is great.
Absolutely. It's absolutely needed because every single person on this planet has experienced trauma. Little T or big
and,
T.
Right. And has a body, right? Every
person has a human body.
Has a body.
I like to say we're human meat sacks. Like it's just like what we're carrying. Like it's just we're just a meat sack. Before we dive into boundaries, tell me why you like being a therapist or kind of what drew you to that field.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could talk about it for a long time, but I will try to keep it short. I think the thing I often tell people, like, it's in my blood. So I come from a family that there's a lot of people in the therapy world, whether that's social work or teachers or therapists or, it's literally just rampant through my family. And so I think there's something that is just in my blood, in my bones. And at one point in my life, I was like, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something different. And then realized, no, I actually really love this. And I think it's something that I'm good at and something that I've only grown more and more in and feel more and more confident in doing this type of work. So I think the thing that drew me as I got older was the more that I learned about therapy and the more especially that I learned about the body, the more things that I naturally thought to be true but didn't have science or data behind got confirmed. And so I think the thing that I just love the most is that in working with folks, I get to witness people in really hard moments in their life, but I also get to be with them and reflect to them their own growth and how they've shifted and changed, and now they're empowered. And like, you know, for some folks, it's even that they love themselves, and that's awesome.
Mhm.
It's a journey that I just always feel really privileged and to be with people in, and it really makes me come alive. So
I love that.
yeah.
That's beautiful. You are witnessing their entire transformation. And we don't know. I mean, obviously, like life still goes, even when you're not in therapy anymore. But you get to witness from one specific state of being to then who knows how the outcome will be. But you see growth no matter what and reflect that back to them. That
Yeah.
must be really rewarding.
Yeah, it's super fun, and just being able to create really I call them like good attachment or like attunement with folks who haven't had that before. And being able to be that person for some people is like the coolest thing. So
That's awesome.
I wouldn't change it for anything.
Oh, good. So you said you love boundaries.
Mhm.
For folks watching, what the hell is a boundary and why is it important?
Yeah. So the way that I like to think about boundaries is it's the behaviors that others can expect from me, and also the behaviors that I'm willing to uh, accept from other people.
Mm,
So it's not just how I want to be treated, but it's also how people can expect that I'm going to show up in the world. Boundaries happen like on both ends, like that. Um, and I often like to think of boundaries in like the metaphor of like fences. So like if everybody has their own home or their own house, and you get to decide what fence you want to have. So some people will have like, stone walls that are like castles and then a moat around them. Some people will have nothing and it's just open space. Some people have picket fences, some people have chain link fences, barbed wire, all sorts of things. But well, it's true.
no, it
And
is.
often, like rightfully so, right? Everyone, I
That's
think,
fair. Yeah.
has boundaries for different reasons. But yeah, so I just think of that as what I'm portraying to the world, as well as like what I'm allowing the world or people to bring to me. So that's how I think about boundaries in general. Why they're important is I think it's important for people to know how to treat me and how I'm going to show up. I want people to know that, because it not only is it's very protective of my own mental health as well as the people around me. It assists people in honestly just feeling like connected to themselves and feeling better about who they are, like self-worth. So I think boundaries creates this safety of structure, or
Mm.
enough structure, that is really important, I think, in every aspect of life.
So kind of like setting expectations for yourself of like, what am I also willing to accept? And how am I treating other people? How are they treating me?
Yeah.
Setting
Yeah.
that stage.
And it exactly. And it occurs, I think, boundaries happen in one-to-one relationships, they happen in family units, they
Mhm.
happen at work, they happen in
Mhm.
other systems, neighborhoods, all sorts of things. So it's boundaries kind of overlap in a lot of different areas. And I think it just allows us to move and navigate those spaces and relationships with more ease and more safety.
The term I'm trying to I mean, we've obviously been in the mental health field over 10 years. Like we know this,
Mhm.
this is very our normal lingo. But
Yeah.
if I were someone that has really never heard of this concept, um, I guess I'm thinking boundaries is very concrete.
Mm.
So, but I guess, like, how can we help not make it such like a vague thing where it's like boundary is like a crossing and like personal space, but like it's also still like boundaries can still be within your own brain too, if that makes sense. I guess I'm
Totally.
trying to like, how can we help people understand it's not just like, it is behaviors, but there's also some like emotional boundaries as well. Could you talk more about that?
Yeah. So one thing that comes to mind is, my guess is a lot of us, if not all of us, have narratives that replay over and over and over and over in our minds. And that impacts how we show up in the world, impacts how we interact with ourselves. And even just like the internal dialogue that can happen. So if it's, I'm not worthy of love, and that's just going over and over again. So even holding or setting boundaries within that space within ourselves, like it might look like, the way that I think about it and often say it to my clients is like, okay, I hear you, narrative, and that may have been the story until now. Or I hear you, and
Yeah.
I choose to believe something different. Or I hear you, and today or in this moment, I choose to believe I'm worthy. Something where it's like, it doesn't have to be forever, because it's hard to interrupt those old patterns, but it's like interrupting or acknowledging those old patterns or narratives, but also saying like, I'm not going to do that today, or I'm not going to do that
Yeah.
in this moment, or in this second.
Yes.
Maybe in the next second I might, but like, what does it mean to even just say like, hold up, like this isn't okay anymore, even within my own internal dialogue. So that would be an example that I think about. Yeah, does that make
That's
sense?
helpful. No, it is helpful because it's highlighting the importance of mindset with boundaries too. It's not just, oh, I'll just do this thing differently that I've never done before because I have a
Right.
pattern of having people walk all over me or whatever. But it is this conversation with yourself. It's this mindset. It's this reframe. We got to work up here before we even implement the boundary and really have that understanding of like, expectations. What do I even want? What do I want from other people? How do I want to show up? And then what's the beliefs of showing up in this way? If I say no for the first time ever and no one's used to me saying no, well, I might lose friends. I might not be worthy anymore. And then it just fucking whatever. So, which leads me to my next question. Why are boundaries so difficult to implement? And, in my experience, just when, I don't know why, but it's like, I feel like with strangers, I'm definitely making a random stereotype and assumption, but I feel like for me with strangers, I have no problem of being like, back the fuck up. I don't know who you are. You don't know me. Like, I'm like stronger in my boundary setting because I don't know who the hell this is. And so there's no like affect, like there's just nothing. But when it's setting a boundary for like a loved one or someone that's like even toxic in a relationship, or people pleasing tendencies for me come up. So it's actually like harder to set that boundaries. So can we talk about why for some people it's so hard to implement a boundary?
Yeah. So I think you're hitting on something that's really important, that it will almost always be harder to implement boundaries with people that we love. When you don't know somebody, or it's a stranger, right? They don't know what to expect from you yet. And you don't know how they're going to interact with you. And so it's really easy, it's easier to say like, nope, I don't like that. Or, I don't have time to talk today. Maybe we can talk tomorrow, whatever the boundary is with somebody, because you're starting to teach them what to expect from you
From the
versus,
get-go.
yes, from the get-go, versus somebody who you've been in relationship with for 20 plus years, or it's your parents or a sibling. They know you in a certain way. They've interacted with you in a certain way based on those patterns that we were talking about, like that are kind of running in your mind. And so to shift that narrative within ourselves is one thing, but to do that with somebody who already has 20 plus years of you acting in a certain way, it's really hard for them to, not always, but often it's really challenging for them to accept that it could be different. Because if you are setting new boundaries with somebody you love, that means they also have to do something different. So it's them challenging their own beliefs. And some people don't want to do that.
How dare
like, I didn't sign up
you?
for this.
Yeah.
I didn't sign up for this. Like, that's on you. And so I think that's where a lot of that pushback can come from. And I trust that like loved ones are not doing that from a place of like hate or, wanting to push away. I think it's more that, hey, this is the function of this relationship or the function of this family. And the moment somebody says, hey, I'm doing it differently, that means the whole system has to shift. And unconsciously, I think folks like really want people to get pulled back in because that's comfortable. Yeah. So I think that's a big component when it has to do with people that we know and love. Or just people that we're really familiar or comfortable with. And I think the other things that can get in the way, I think about like fear, shame, and discomfort. So I think there's a lot of times there's a fear of what might happen if I choose to set a boundary. Especially, I'm going to kind of focus more on people that we know and love, because again, if there is this pattern way of being in this relationship, the reality is like, I don't know how this person will respond. They might be like, you know what, if you're going to be this way, then I don't want to be friends with you anymore, or I can't communicate, or, there is a risk, a higher risk, right? So I think fear gets in the way. People don't know, fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
And then I think shame can come into it too, of like, well, I should have never allowed this in the first place. So maybe because I shouldn't have done that. I deserve it now. I deserve to be treated this way because I should have known earlier. And since I didn't, then I guess I'm just, I'm going to have to live this way for the rest of my life.
So many stories.
Yeah. So yeah, I think shame gets in the way there, again, rightfully so. And then I think it's setting new boundaries or shifting how you show up in a relationship. It's uncomfortable at first. It's really uncomfortable. And I think as human beings, we want to be comfortable. And even if it's unhealthy or toxic, there's something familiar and comfortable about, I know what to expect in this and I know what to do. And so that feels better in some ways, or more comfortable than doing something new and not having any idea about what might happen next.
Totally. And for people that like the need to be in control or whatever, this is like, holy shit, what am I going to expect? So I'm not even going to do it. I'm going to stay in my bubble, be miserable. And then the stories will just keep playing. So, but some of us may not even have that awareness of the stories we're saying to ourselves, or even B, how do I know I should set a boundary? Like, is this the opportunity? So tell me more about how would one start to build their awareness of boundaries, and especially how would they know if maybe they're being violated or what to do about it when their boundaries are crossed?
Yeah. The place where I would encourage people to begin is, if you don't know your values, I would start there. I think knowing the things that we value in our lives. So whether that's, I value humor and play and family and hard work and spirituality, for example. If I know that those are my values, that can start to shape how I want to, where I might need to or want to set boundaries in my life with certain people. So I think that's a great place to begin. If you're like watching this and you're like, I don't know what you're talking about when you're talking about values. I don't know if that Does that work that you do, Paige, with people?
It is work that I do, but
Okay.
I would love, please tell me more about values. It's always
Well,
valuable.
yeah, values are valuable. I feel like it's such a thing that like I know and then it's hard to explain. Um, but I mean, in short, it's just the things in life that matter to you most, even when no one else is around to witness it. So, one value of mine is play. So for me, like if I don't have play in my life, like I recognize that I feel less energy, I feel less connected to other people, less connected to myself. I notice that in my body, I can start to feel more lethargic. I can start to feel more tension in my body. And so for me, I've had to put in place boundaries of play. So what I mean by that is like I know that every weekend definitely need to do something that's fun and playful. So that could look a lot of different ways, but that is something that I have to do every weekend. Bottom line.
You make it a priority.
I make it a priority. And it doesn't, and another thing is like I often will have like mini dance parties. It could be literally one song and it could be in between sessions and I'm just like, yeah, this is great, because to me that is so energizing and really helps me connect back to myself and back to my body. And so yeah, so that's what I would say about like values, and that's just like one example. But I feel like when we can connect and know like what are the things that are most important to me, then we can start to notice, whether it's in relationship or like at work, where other people might not have that same value or might dismiss that value in some way, and starting to notice for myself like, oh, that didn't feel good when they just laughed or like scoffed at the fact that I like to have dance parties or like rolled their eyes. That didn't feel good in my body. It felt like a nausea in my stomach, or I felt like this sense of like wanting to move away or push away. That to me is like signs of, oh, so now that I recognize this person maybe doesn't have that value, or can't respect that this is something that I value, I might need to have certain boundaries around them, whether it's maybe I just don't engage with them about this specific thing because
Love that.
doesn't feel good. So I think it's a lot about like just beginning to notice for yourself, like one, your values, and then also when does something in your body or your nervous system tell you like something's off or something's not right? I think often it is a visceral thing when when boundaries are violated. And so for some people, it could be like a queasy feeling. You might get like headaches. You might feel really exhausted after being with somebody. And starting to to me, it's like, I would say experiment with acknowledging or recognizing those times and then seeing like, okay, so if I felt exhausted after hanging out with Susan for just 30 minutes, next time Susan wants me to hang out, I'm going to check in and be like, oh, I have a resistance to that. And so I might say to Susan, you know what, today's not a great day. How about I check in a few days and see if I'm feeling up to it? So that's a way to set a boundary. That's not saying, no, Susan, we will never hang out again. Right? It doesn't have
come
to
back
be,
to it.
yeah. And if Susan's like, whatever, Susan might have whatever response she has, but it's choosing to recognize like, ooh, something doesn't feel good about saying yes or that invitation. And so I'm going to say no for now.
I love
and
that.
just see, does that feel better after I say, and part of it might be like, oh, I feel a little anxious or I feel a little worried about what Susan's going to think. But also, does that queasiness dissipate, right? Does that, do I feel more like I have more energy than I did the last time I hung out with Susan versus saying, no, I don't want to hang out today. So those are different ways to begin building awareness. And then the other thing that I think about is like, who in your life has healthy boundaries? And how does it feel to be around that person? How how does it feel to have them set boundaries with or hold boundaries with you? And because I think sometimes it's a lot easier to focus on what doesn't feel good. But I also think it's equally as important to notice like what does feel good about when somebody sets and holds a boundary with me. So for example, I love when somebody I don't love when people tell me no necessarily, but I love that and I respect when I hear a no or a not this week. I might be disappointed because I wanted to spend time with somebody, for example. But to
They're
me,
taking
that's
care of
them. Yeah, that's them communicating like I'm gonna take care of me, so like I don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
So there's freedom in that, at least for me. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, great, you know you, and you're taking that for yourself. Lovely. And so the next time I can then trust their yes means
Mm-hmm.
yes, because I trust that
Yes.
their no, they're gonna say no when they need to say no.
That was so much great, so much good. So great, so good. Like you walked through so many parts of that. And I love that you also shared that example of play. So it sounds
Mhm.
like start with values, start questioning what's important to you. And then as you're kind of walking through that, it's like a constant check-in. Like
Mhm.
ask yourself, check in with your body, try it out, check in again, ask yourself, try a thing, check in again.
Yeah.
It's just, it seems to just keep going back to yourself and
Yep.
testing the waters. And really kind of what I tell my clients for anything that they're trying new, whether incorporating a new habit, is be a scientist. Completely
Yeah.
just be an observer. Don't be a judge of like good and
Yep.
bad. It's just I'm observing and just noticing what this feels like, what this is. Then I take inspired action. And you said earlier about I choose to. That's also very important in my work, is remembering that empowerment. We all have choice, even though it doesn't feel
Yeah.
like it. What do you mean I'm
Mhm.
choosing to be depressed? It's like, well, I mean, yes and no, but anyways, it's what you do with
Sure.
that. What we know
Right.
this now what? So,
Mhm.
and you were also walking us through as just a somatic therapist, you were naming a lot of body cues of
Yeah.
when do we know. It sounded like cues and
Yeah.
responses. So what were you were saying, like one of them's like maybe nausea or a headache, or you like literally like move your body. Like what are
Mhm.
other signs of your body that is telling you like this shit's about boundaries? Or why else, like what else should someone know about the connection with boundaries and body?
Yeah. So great question. I think that so like in the culture that we're in, and I get every culture is different. And so just speaking from like the United States, living in Colorado, but I've lived in the Midwest, I've lived on the West Coast before, and it felt similar of we're actually taught to just ignore our body. Like, oh, you have a headache, or oh, you feel tired. Well, we're going to work anyway.
Yeah.
Or oh, it's different now with COVID, but I would say like even if you're like sick, the expectation is like, oh, you just have a cold, you should be at work.
Mm-hmm.
Versus like, what does it mean to actually listen to the cue of our body of like, oh, I feel like I'm tired and I need to like lay down, but like I choose not to lay down anyway, or I choose to do
Mm-hmm.
something opposite. Or even like if I was sitting here like this the whole time and I'm like, man, my back hurts, but I'm just gonna keep sitting like this, versus like, oh, I could just like sit back and relax. That
Yes.
feels awesome.
Mm.
So I feel like when it comes to boundaries, our bodies alert us to what doesn't feel good or what feels like a threat. So I think boundaries violations often feel like threatening, because it is in some ways. Now, some are more like maybe very like what's the word I'm looking for? Like it's a spectrum of threatening, and some are like really severely threatening, but others it's more like emotional or intellectual or whatever. Anyway, it's threatening. And so what happens in our bodies when they're threatened is our bodies have survival responses. And so that can look a lot of different ways for everybody, but I would say like looking for tension in your body, like, and typically people hold tension in certain areas of their body. So some people will hold it in their shoulders, some people hold it in their gut. So they'll have a lot of like stomach pain or hurt or, tension or tightness, cramping. Some people will hold it in like their glutes or their legs. Some people will hold it in like their back. So some people hold it in their head. And so that's where the headaches come in. So being curious about your tension. Like I mentioned, like headaches, things that are like when I'm stressed out, right? If I'm overly stressed, those are other cues to look for, because I think boundary violations impact like the stress level, because they really do. There's such a wide range of what it could look like. It's hard to like pin down things, but I would say for somebody who is new to this, they're like, oh my gosh, what do you mean my body gives me cues? I would say look for tension, specifically. And even if you notice yourself like wanting to move away, or I had somebody recently talk about, they were, in a meeting or something, and they noticed themselves like leaning away from a certain coworker.
Wow.
And I was like, oh, well, what would happen if you, instead of like made yourself sit up and sit close to this person, what if instead you actually just shifted your body to move where it wanted to be? And what happened then? Did my body still lean this way, or is my body now able to be like, oh yeah, that feels better to have more space or distance? So it's these little like experiments of like you said, like being a scientist and being curious versus judgmental about like, what is my body telling me? And like, what happens if I like listen to it? Does it feel better? Does it feel weird? Does it feel like the same? I don't know the answer to those, only you will. But I think that's when we begin to pay attention to our body and the cues it gives us, it will be easier and more, we will be able to more quickly recognize when something isn't right or when something is right. Oh man, when I'm around Paige, like I notice my shoulders where I normally hold tension feel really relaxed. And I don't feel like I have to like put myself together and like hold myself really tight. I feel like I can just be totally relaxed and comfortable in my chair. So that feels really good.
Damn. Right? This is crazy because I'm just thinking of the people in my life, from teachers to family members to obviously friends, and just noticing, even just talking about posture, period. Like, yeah. I could just talk about posture and how like just the presence of like what is even your body language around these actual people, and what is that telling you? And I know for me, with some like professionals when I was in the workspace that I really like admired and thought like, I was like, this person's, I have a lot of respect for this individual. I was kind of like uptight and like alert and like, I mean, I was engaged. However, this is different, but I still just think just noticing just like, where are you, where is your body when you're just around other people? Like, do we even know what we're freaking doing? Like when we're hanging out and we're lounging on the couch with whoever you're comfortable with, like I don't know, at least for me, like I'm not putting my body in the forefront. I'm not even thinking, it's so innate, right? Like we just don't even think about it. So it's interesting of just how we carry ourselves literally. And going back to boundaries earlier, what you said of this is actually how we're showing up physically and mentally, how we're showing up in these relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's like what I would tell folks, because I think some folks will hear this and be like, oh my God, so I pay attention to my body all the time.
Not all the time.
That's too much. But it's more just like the next time you're with somebody who you are like really enjoying yourself, and you notice like, oh my gosh, I haven't laughed this hard in forever. Tap in and be like, what am I noticing? Oh man, I'm like lounging back and I haven't done this in like, I don't know, months. Okay, back to the thing. Or if I'm with somebody and I'm like, ooh, I just had this sense of like my whole stomach just churned at that thought. Okay, so I'm gonna just like note that, and
Just
then like
note it.
just note it, and then I might come back to this and be like, I actually need to think about what you just said. I'll
Mhm.
come back to you before I can check back in, like, ooh, what do I need to say in response that my stomach immediately knew was like a little off,
Mhm.
even if my brain is still catching up.
Yes, I'm so glad you mentioned that. Make sure to not be obsessed about it and
Yeah.
just check in. Everything that we've talked about on this video today, just check in, notice our thoughts, notice how we present ourselves, what is important to us. And yeah, just keep doing inventory without judgment. More
Yes.
just, these are just facts. This is just what it is. And then assess later, what do I want to do with it? And a great
Mm-hmm.
place to process that is with a therapist or a coach
Yeah.
or someone or a friend, someone you trust, a mentor. You can process that also with others too. You don't feel like you
Mm-hmm.
have to keep this alone.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Nor should we. I think it's community and connection with people, and especially what I say is like co-regulating relationships where I feel like my nervous system can totally settle and my body feels relaxed and I feel at ease, even if I'm still like alert to the conversation.
Mm,
Those are the relationships that are utmost important to be able to process these things,
yeah.
um, so that you're not alone. And yeah, I don't think none of us are meant to just like figure things out on our own. We do that in relationship with other people.
Yes. Beautiful. Well, is there any lasting thoughts about boundaries? Anything else we haven't touched
Hmm.
before we wrap up?
I mean, I'm sure there's things we didn't touch on, but for now, I think that that's a great start. And I just feel like give them a try. Boundaries are great. And I think too, like one last thing I might say is like the goal isn't to like go from no boundaries to like all of the boundaries. It's something in between. Having all the boundaries in the world or having none at all. Neither of those is healthy. It's
Mhm.
something in between of
Mhm.
like what's what's best for me. And it takes trial and error, honestly.
Mhm.
So giving yourself that space and time to um ideally without your own judgment, be curious about these things, try some new things, see what works, see what doesn't, and think of it as like experiment or play, as I like to think about it.
I
Gives it
like
a
that.
little less pressure.
Beautiful. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Jenny. This has
Yeah.
been packed with value. I'm so grateful you shared your wisdom. Tell me where people can find you if they wanted to connect with you further.
Yeah. So um, one way to find us is just through the website, somatictherapypartnerscom. And there you can find there's 3 clinicians that you can work with, myself being one of them. We have our bios and everything, so you can kind of read and see what might be a good fit for you. You can also, I think you'll have the link to our Instagram page.
Mhm.
We also have a Facebook page. I think our Instagram page is Somatic in Denver, and then our Facebook page is Somatic Therapy Partners. But you'll be able to have links to those, and yeah, come check us out. We're here for you. We care about you. We care about your nervous system and your body. And so, if you're wondering how to continue this work, come and find us. We're here for you.
I love that. Thank you so much. And for those
Yeah.
watching, if this was helpful or informative for you, I would love to connect with you as well. My website will be also in the description, www.paigemitchell.coach. And you can book a free consultation. We can just hop on a call and see where you are and see what's a good fit and what's aligned. Yeah, thank you so much, Jenny. I wish you the
Yeah.
best weekend. It's Friday,
Thank
so
you.
I hope you have a
Yeah.
good rest of your day, and thank you so much.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Paige. It's been fun.
Bye.
Bye.